Here's what we're going to do because, yeah, we're shutting down. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to shut down. We're being yelled at now. We're going to try to come back on in a little while, just check back, and as soon as we can, we'll stream from wherever the heck we're going. Okay. All right, we're signing off. We're going to throw it out.
The paths of Pamela Geller and Donald Trump crossed after the Curtis Colwell Center attack. It is not widely discussed, but Donald Trump began his presidential campaign by denouncing Pamela Geller. For days, he assaulted Pamela's character and told whoppers about himself. But when Geller was the target of another assassination plot, Trump was silent. There are further indications that Donald Trump has a Sharia problem. These are the facts. On May 3, 2015, 2 men were shot down by security outside the Curtis Colwell Center in Garland, Texas. They were inspired by what they thought were calls to action from the terror state ISIS, and were there to kill, on behalf of ISIS, Pamela Geller, Robert Spencer, Bosch Faustin, Gert Wilders, Tom Trento, Don the Conservative, William Burdick, and anyone else attending the event where images of Islam's Prophet Muhammad were displayed. Donald Trump began his presidential campaign by denouncing Pamela Geller, and he weighed in on the matter almost immediately.
This has nothing to do with free speech. I'll give you an example. If she went after, instead of the Muslim, went after Jesus, let's see how long she'd last.
Trump's hysterical ravings intensified over a period of 2 days, but a month later, when Geller was the target of a second assassination attempt, he was silent.
Allegedly wanted to attack police officers, but sources tell CBS News his original target may have been the outspoken critic of Islam, Pamela Geller.
For 2 days, in the first week of May, Donald Trump, in one of his most emphatic public statements to date, told the world he did not like Pamela Geller or what she was doing.
She's taunting people.
This is taunting.
What is she doing?
And what is she doing it for?
Pamela was crystal clear about the motivation behind the Mohammed art exhibit and contest, which was discussed on her website for weeks. It was directly related to the Refugee Charlie campaign. After publishing the Mohammed cartoons in 2006 and surviving a firebombing in 2009, in January of 2015, 12 people were killed by Islamic terrorists in the Charlie Hebdo Paris headquarters. The world was incensed. 1 million people took to the streets of Paris. It was an international news story that went on for days. These are the men killed for violating the Sharia blasphemy laws. Donald Trump found this to be an occasion to tweet about not jihad, not Sharia, or free speech, but rather gun control. The world went in a different direction, however, and the Hebdo murders became the inspiration for an international cry in support of free speech. Je suis Charlie. Donald Trump was silent on Twitter during Je suis Charlie. Meanwhile, in Texas, the Sunnis were chafing under all the negative attention the Hebdo murders were causing.
Talk about bad timing. Just outside of Dallas, Texas, this coming weekend, there will be a conference called Stand with the Prophet. The conference will be focused on Mohammed. Among the invited guests, a radical New York imam with close ties to terrorism.
I'm saying these people are enemies of Islam, and Muslims, which are almost all the Muslims, must speak up for the truth and justice and the message of mercy. There are going to be all the imams of the Dallas who will be standing up and issuing a statement that we are against terror.
But I wonder if Imam Wahaj, that's how you say his name, he's a New York imam who runs a radical mosque here, as you know. He's an unindicted co-conspirator in a terrorist act in 1992.
Siraj
I thought you said
Wahaj is not
invited.
a radical
Right,
imam.
indicted.
He
Okay.
stands up for peace and justice in his neighborhood.
Imam, you can buy his little sermons. He sells them almost like Reverend Wright in Chicago. And we bought one of them, and here's what's on it. He says, quote, "In this so-called democracy of America will crumble, and there will be nothing. The only thing that will remain will be Islam." And this guy runs a radical mosque in Brooklyn, and you're inviting him to the conference. Now, I'm wondering if he's going to apologize, if he's going to condemn, like you are, the attackers in Paris. And you know what I'm betting? He's not. He's not going to do it.
What I like to tell you, if you are willing to listen this, Bill O'Reilly, that being unindicted, not committing any crime is a good thing in our country.
You're dodging this guy's philosophy,
in our peace and
Mom.
justice process.
You're dodging his philosophy. You know you're dodging it because, look, I believe that you are an honest man. This guy, he's trouble. He's big trouble. And he's hanging with you over the weekend.
And you need to know that Republican
In the face of this defiance, Pamela Geller engaged in some defiance of her own.
But until then, what do you got coming up in the future that the folks should know about?
Well, I'm gonna do a conference in that building.
Oh, fantastic!
And thus was born the inaugural Mohammed Art Exhibit and Contest. But the fact is, Donald Trump put out the flame that Pamela Geller tried to keep alive.
So they were taunting, and they really taunted, and guess where they are right now?
Donald Trump never mentions ISIS in his denunciations of Pamela Geller.
I have absolutely no respect for her. She's putting people at great danger.
And I'm much tougher than she is in any different way you can, whether it's military, whether it's beating ISIS or anything else. And she's doing a terrible thing for our country.
Just imagine where Trump's campaign would be today if he had only sided with Pamela Geller after Garland, instead of, in effect, taking the side of ISIS. If he had sided with her, he wouldn't have made all those gaffes about the refugees. By the summer of 2015, the rate of illegal immigrants entering Western countries reached unprecedented, catastrophic levels. These were mostly vigorous, well-fed young Muslim men. The local municipalities were overwhelmed. It was like an invasion. It was the Hijra. Trump weighed in, saying, "You have to take them in."
Do you object to them coming to the USA?
I hate the concept of it, but on a humanitarian basis, with what's happening, you have to.
This remarkably uninformed opinion took no account that ISIS warned they were going to do exactly this. We all remember Trump's promise that if elected, they were going back.
If they come in, and if I win, they're going back. They're going back. They're going back.
But now how many people remember that the very next day, probably less than 12 hours later, he said in answer to the question, should we let some of those people in this country, he says possibly yes.
With the refugees, should we be letting some of those people into this country?
It's like incredible what's going on, but then the answer is possibly yes.
Then 10 days later, he says he could be talked into taking between 3,000 and 10,000 refugees.
They were talking about 3,000 people. I begrudgingly would say, oh, maybe, I don't know, maybe.
Letting them into the United States.
A little bit. Then they said 10,000. I'm not thrilled, but maybe 200,000 people. This could be the greatest.
He doesn't want any refugees.
We have no idea who the people are. They have no papers. They have no paperwork. You can get forged documents very easily in Syria.
Which, ironically, is the position of Pamela Geller, a person Trump has absolutely no respect for.
This woman that nobody ever heard of.
There's a good possibility that Trump remembered Pamela from the Ground Zero Mosque. But who today remembers Donald Trump's role in the Ground Zero Mosque? For all of his money and influence, he was irrelevant. He remembered Pamela standing up to formidable odds and getting 70% of Americans polled to have an opinion about the Ground Zero Mosque. If the story was not quelled immediately, Pamela would bring up subjects like jihad, Islam, Mohammed, Sharia, free speech. If the story was not quelled immediately, Pamela would compete with Trump for the public's attention and lessen the impact of his announcement of his presidential campaign, he was not prepared to discuss any of these things, so he stifled her. We have seen this kind of thing before. We have seen ruthless politicians, and it is certainly not the first time we have seen him trump somebody. But this time was different. This was cowardice in the face of the enemy. 3 times he denied Americans protection from ISIS attacks on American soil for the sake of his personal and political ambitions. And the implications of this are ominous. A search for the terms Trump mosque will return prodigious results, claiming Trump will close mosques if elected. Over a dozen pages of links to Trump's position on the closing of mosques. This is made all the more remarkable by the fact that he never said that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't heard about the closing of the mosque. It depends. If the mosque is, loaded for bear, I don't know. You're going to have to certainly look at it.
Trump's language certainly lends itself to misunderstanding, that is, unless the subject is Pamela Geller.
And I'm much tougher than she is in any different way.
Challenge accepted. Pamela Geller would never, under any circumstances, run from a question about the superiority of the U.S. Constitution over Sharia law.
Would you want the president, or if you were a candidate, to say, I will promise to uphold the Constitution over the Sharia law?
Well, I think it's an argument I don't want to get into. It's not my argument, so it's an argument that I won't get into.
In general, Trump seems to be strangely unaware of the subject of jihad, and you can't blame Pamela Geller for this. Again, we find Trump being ambiguous about things Islamic. This time, it is the logo of the Islamic supremacists, the niqab.
It's like I saw somebody, I won't even say because it's embarrassing. We want it where the women over there don't have to wear the you-know-what. And then I said, oh, well, that makes sense. That's nice. Then I saw women interviewed. They said, we want to wear them. We've worn them for 1,000 years. Why would anybody tell us not to? They want to. What the hell are we getting involved for? In fact, it's easier. You don't have to put up makeup. Look how beautiful everyone looks. Wouldn't it be easier? Wah. Right? Wouldn't that be easy? I'll tell you, if I was a woman, I don't want to. Wah. I'm ready, darling. Let's go. It's true.
Donald Trump is quite simply delusional with his claims of being a defender of free speech, because we know what the real thing looks like.
Free speech is very important, but you want to be smart about it, and you don't want to provoke people.
I'm a bigger believer in free speech than she is, believe me. Nobody believes stronger in free speech than me.
Geert Wilders mentioned that the PEN, a writers association that was founded in order to defend the freedom of expression, is giving an award to the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists. Pamela spoke about this as well. And that the 145 of the members of PEN, including some very prominent writers, Joyce Carol Oates, who you may have heard of, and some others, have pulled out because they say that this is manifesting cultural arrogance. They said that the French manifested cultural arrogance in drawing Muhammad and allowing Charlie Hebdo to draw Muhammad. They don't seem concerned about the cultural arrogance of the assassins who murdered these cartoonists in the name of a blasphemy law that the cartoonists did not hold. They didn't care about that imposition of one culture over another. They only cared that the French were following their own long tradition of free expression. Now that's a terrible thing for an organization that's designed to defend the freedom of expression. It's a terrible dissent, and it bespeaks a dissent in our whole culture in general. A very good friend of mine told me right before I left for this event that you're just poking them in the eye. You're trying to provoke them. You know, why are you doing that? You're the one that's being offensive. And this was a friend, you know, and I was kind of taken aback. And I had to stop and think, well, what exactly is wrong with that? And what's wrong with that is that this is only offensive because Muslims have made it offensive. This is only something, as Geert Wilders said, that needs armed guards because Muslims will kill you for drawing Muhammad. It would never be offensive otherwise. Consider this. The murderers of the Charlie Hebdo cartoonists had an accomplice, and as they were murdering the cartoonists, the accomplice went to a kosher supermarket in Paris and murdered 4 Jews. What had they done? They didn't draw Muhammad. How did they offend Muslims? They offended Muslims by being Jewish. Okay, so we have to not draw Muhammad because that'll poke them in the eye and offend them. And then we have to not be Jewish because that will poke them in the eye and offend them. And then what? Okay, I guess pork and alcohol are right out. Okay, and then what? Take the humor, yes, and the Islamic State. The Islamic State is beheading people and taking sex slaves and subjugating the Christians under the hegemony of the Islamic law, and they're doing it all on the basis of Quranic directives, and so that's all Islamic. So I guess we can't say a word about that, because that would poke them in the eye and offend Muslims. And you see, step by step by step, we're ending up going in the direction of accepting Islamic law. And every Western media outlet that refused to publish the Muhammad cartoons was accepting Islamic blasphemy law. And so I say it's time for a little cultural self-assertiveness. The freedom of speech is not an end in itself. The freedom of speech was put into the Constitution as our fundamental protection against tyranny. If the governing authority or any power that rules in whatever way, and as Pamela noted, you know, you want to know who rules over you, then find out who you cannot criticize. The people who have the clout, the people who have the power, if they are able to silence by the rule of law, by the force of law, those whose opinions they don't like, then a free society is dead. Then they can do whatever they wish unopposed, and dissent is impossible. And that's what this is all about. This is not about insulting Muslims or offending Muslims or poking them in the eye or even about drawing Muhammad. Ultimately, it's just that that's where they are making the line, and that's where we're going to stand. And we're going to stand against tyranny and for freedom.
First at 10, we have team coverage lined up for you tonight as we dig deeper into the 3rd Arizona terror suspect now linked to that Draw Muhammad shooting.
Turns out he planned to attack the Super Bowl, and the FBI didn't know until just weeks ago. ABC 15's Nohelani Graff joins us live. And Nohe, the FBI saying he was trying to get his hands on pipe bombs?
That's what a source tells the FBI, Katie. He was also arrested with a gun on him, another found in his home. Today, the prosecution painted the picture of a man who wanted to hurt people. Abdul Malik Abdul Karim about as silent in court as the pictures show, while the prosecution pulled bombshell after bombshell out of the FBI's testimony. Citing a confidential witness, the FBI says Karim provided the guns for the Garland, Texas attack. He helped plan it out and train the men who carried it out, Nadir Sufi and Elton Simpson, going to a shooting range in the Arizona desert. The prosecution says he's dangerous, pointing to a flash drive found on his computer with a violent video called Training That Makes Killing Civilians Acceptable. The next question is, will there be more arrests? In the indictments here, the word others is used several times in addition to the 3 Phoenix men. Back to you guys.